was just doing a service on my Land Rover Series 3 and had drained and refilled the main gearbox oil. Looking on my drain can afterwards, I found these. This is actually one broken spring that had come out of the gearbox. With a bit of looking at the Green Bible, I found this. There he is, RTC 1956. As you can see, it's definitely one that has broken, so if I bring it over, that's the piece. There are 3 of these that sit in the 3rd, 4th gear synchromesh cage, and they hold the central gear cog. They hold it centralised when you're not got a gear engaged. Brilliant. Good news is this spring did not fall through the gearbox, getting caught in cogs, chewing up, causing damage, but I've been very fortunate that it just was thrown or dropped or got washed straight down to the sump, and so it's unlikely to cause other damage. However, that one's now missing and I need to replace it, and the additional 2 as well, since I'm in there. So how do you go about replacing these springs? Oh, it's easy. First of all, you take the floor out, then you take the transmission tunnel out, then you take the seat box out, then you take the entire gearbox out, and you just strip it down to whatever extent to replace these 3 springs. And all of that work to replace these springs, each of which, as of today, cost 41 pence. There is, however, a legend that is spoken about across the Land Rover internet boards. The legend of the ability to change the 3rd, 4th synchro spring, detent spring in situ, i.e. without removing a gearbox. However, no matter where I've looked online, I have not found anyone who has done it, although there's lots of people who know people who know people who have done it. No instructions, although there are dead links across the internet apparently giving instructions. This is a real mystery. After much searching, I did find one post with step-by-step instructions of how to do this in situ from back in 2009 or 2010. I don't want this information to be lost. I don't want to take my gearbox out, so I'm going to give it a go and show you how I progress with this. Fortunately, I just happen to have laying about a spare Series 3 gearbox that I was given about 10 years ago. It's never been fitted by me. I have no idea on its ability to run properly, and I certainly wouldn't fit it without a rebuild. It just wouldn't be worth the effort. But this gives me a golden opportunity to attempt to do this in a practice run. So what I'm going to do now is start by cleaning off as much of the gearbox as I need to. I don't care about the rest, and see what we've got. Okay, now if this was in the vehicle, we'll have got the floor and the transmission tunnel up. What we've done is the first initial gross cleaning of the top of the gearbox. So here, there is the selector cover, and obviously the gear stick and the selectors down here. So as you change gear, it selects different ones. So the first step is actually to put it in 3rd gear and we'll leave it in third gear because that's what's required when we're working inside. Next, we'll take off this gear stick and housing and then just temporarily replace the bolts and the clutch inspection cover. Bolts undone, we can remove the gear stick, just lift him away, and then what we'll do is we'll just pop the bolts back in to stop loads of cat getting in there, and then proceed with the next step. So clutch plate cover bolts as well. Next we'll take off the two detent spring and ball covers, one on each side, little L-shaped bracket with two bolts. When you take it off, it leaves a hole. Just put a blob of grease in so the ball bearing doesn't drop out and get lost. First one's off, and the hole blocked with a blob of grease. There's actually a spring pressing against those brackets. You have to make sure it doesn't ping out. Here's the other side. So just remove the spring and put some grease in, as I said, just to stop the ball bearing coming out. It will just stick in the grease so you don't lose it. And next we'll take out what should be 6 bolts or 6 fastenings to remove the cover. So you've got 2 bolts here at the front, you've got 2 nuts on studs here, and then you should have 2 fastenings there, although for whatever reason this gearbox doesn't have it. But we'll remove those and lift the cover. Actually, I just thought before we remove the cover, there is a third detent which is held in place with this brass plug, so that needs to be removed as well. So I'm going to remove that and then the cover. Having got the central brass cover off, fastenings off, a bit of levering and a tap with a rubber persuader, gentle. The cap, the lid is now free, so we can take him off. As you can see, our blob of grease saved that ball bearing getting lost. It rolled down here. Springs would have held it in place. There is also, you can see a little indentation there. There is a rubber spacer just to hold the spring in place. And as you can see, you've got the other 2 detents. And you can see that they slot into these slots in the selectors and hold them in gear. So next job, I'll remove the ball bearings and the little sort of elongated ball bearings, and then try and get these 3 selectors out, which is like one of those old metal puzzles where you have to turn, twist and whatever. We'll start off with the third, fourth selector, then the first, second, and finally the reverse selector. Right, we'll start looking at that then. Okay, third and fourth. You need to lift it and twist to work it out. So let's give that a go. One-handed. You can see the yoke there. Extra hard with one hand, of course. There we go, it's coming. Probably lift this out of the way a bit. Yeah, it's the one-handed that's caused me a problem, I'm afraid. Let me try. Oh, there we go. Right, so that's the third, fourth selector. And the first, second should be relatively easy. You get more and more space. And finally, the reverse selector. Okay, there we go. Finally, we've got a view of the third, fourth synchro cage. Let's move the light a bit. This is towards the rear of the vehicle. because this is in third gear. Under there you can see one of the pins, the spring is under there, really awkward. If I move it into fourth gear, we can see the other end and see the springs. It can be a bit difficult. Let me just try. Oh, first go. You see the other end of the sort of brassy looking pins just here. And if I rotate, you can just, I'm hoping this comes out on video. Let me try and zoom in. Just see, and let me steady it. There is the spring. Just there. It comes along and hooks over. It goes under this, or through a gap in this ring, under the pin, and through to the other side and hooks over there. So we finally, you can see the hooked end there, I hope, just there. Problem now is because this gearbox actually does have its springs. If I'm going to practice, I've got to try and get those ones out, and it's quite difficult. Let me just see if I can get hooked under it. And here we are with the screwdriver just hooked under the end of that spring. The only solution I can think of is to lift it up so it's unhooked like this, and then push it towards the left, towards the front of the vehicle, so that the hook is actually then resting on the channel in the cog rather than over the side of it. Then move it into back into third gear, so I can hopefully grab the other end of it and pull it forward and out, because that's the way it'll have to be pushed in. Because normally you wouldn't see, if you're fitting, you wouldn't see this side of it, because the spring would be pushed through towards the right until the end hooked over, all out of sight. So let me see if I can lift that and push it right, but I'm not going to be able to film it because I need about 8 hands, I reckon. Well, this is fascinating. I've just made a discovery when I've been messing around with this. There, where are we? There is the end of a spring going that way. If I turn this, so the next one comes round, you can see just there, just glinting, is the end of another spring. And if I turn to the third, oh dear, no spring, no detent spring in there, which is quite interesting. What that means, because I've been having trouble trying to get those springs out, is assuming I can't get those other two out, which is what I would want to do on my gearbox, is to replace the other two as well, since I was in there. But if push comes to shove and I cannot get them out, I wouldn't be able to get them out on the live gearbox either. However, it does mean that I have one already missing, which gives me a position to try and fit a replacement. So if I cannot get those out, it's still worth me getting some detent springs and seeing if I can fit the missing one here on this box in my workshop, because if I can, then I could fit the missing one, the broken one, on my live gearbox. So this exercise has still been worth doing. I don't have those detent springs yet, I've got to order them, but what I would like to do is to be able to get the second and third out of here, because I could try changing all three, because when there's more than one in there, everything gets a bit harder because everything starts tightening up. But I thought that was quite interesting. So I guess someone at some time found a bit of a broken detent spring and took this gearbox off, and that's how it stayed. But I'm going to see if I can fit another one. Well, I got my new detent springs at last. I was actually surprised at the angle of them. There's quite a amount of spring in there, and they're pretty unforgiving. They don't bend much. I just thought I'd just try slipping one into the area in the synchro just to see how it goes, and quite easily I've got it to sit in there. It's going to be impossible for me to film at the same time, but I'm going to use some forceps and see if I can force it to bend, and see if it'll go in. Basically, this will be the real test. was pretty awkward to do anything with the gear in third, as the instructions have said. So I've pushed the synchro towards the front, and it gives me easier access. And I've managed to get the spring to drop into the area much more easily. The left-hand end is pointing towards the slot it's going to have to go through. So whether I can push it in enough to be able to swing the right-hand end around and then force it in, I don't know, but I'm going to have a go. I've now got the spring full length in the gap it's supposed to be in, or between the the two cogs, obviously sprung right up, but it's straight, so it's not. Let me turn this a bit. Oh, it's just moved then. Oh, I've got to be careful. I'll push him back again. I'm going to see if I can force him in. I gave up with that because it was too tight and springy. I've moved it back into third, and I don't know if you can see, but looking right back to here, there's actually quite a gap under there. I've managed to just slip the spring straight there, and the whole length of the spring is comfortably in there, as you can see, without pressing this end. There is enough room. So now it's a case of trying to compress it a bit flatter and see if it will slide sideways away from us and line up with a slot. I'm going to give that a go. Bloody hell, bloody hell. It's now nearly under there. I reckon. Let's see if we can move the light a bit. So that end is just hooked over. The lumpy bumpy bit in the spring is now partly tucked under the brass sort of pin thing. This right hand end is pretty close to the slot. I can't see if it's... Yeah, you see the end of it? I reckon we might be onto a winner. Bit more time then. Bit more time fiddling. So using my fingers and using screwdrivers and chisels and whatever else, I've not been able to pop that spring under the pin so that it's aligned in its slot. I spoke to Dunsfold Land Rover, and because there's a rumour that someone there knew how to do it, they confirmed there used to be a guy who could do it, who retired 7 years ago, and that he had small hands, and he used to be able to get his hands inside this aperture, and then with some form of pliers was able to pop it in place. So it can be done. Now my hands aren't going to go in, and I didn't have any suitable bent nose pliers, so I just ordered this lot off of Amazon, and they are absolutely fantastic. Real weighty bits of kit, 11-inch long. These are substantial. The five of them for £12. So I'm going to give a try with them. So I'm going to use this, I think it's 45-degree bent nose pliers to grab that spring in the middle, try and push it downwards and then towards and under that pin. Let's give them a go. I don't believe it, but with very little effort I have got this. So it's now sitting half under the pin. So I thought I'd grab a bit of film while it's there. I'm going to try and get it the rest of the way. It is now all the way under, and I've just got to try and bring it towards the back of the gearbox and under the ring in the synchromesh. I've just rotated the synchromesh slightly. The spring is definitely under the pin. However, I'm not able to slide it because the far end of the spring is just hooked over. So the next job is to grab the spring towards that end, just lift it slightly so it unhooks and try and slide it forward. Oh my goodness. I had a lot of mucking around, and now I think using straight nose long reach pliers, I managed to grab it, give it a bit of a twist, jiggle it, and it slid forward. I'm now going to see if I can slide it the rest of the way. Here's another view of the spring from the other side, showing it definitely disengaged from the top of the screen from the edge of that cog, and it's going in. I've now got it so the sort of lumpy bumpy bit in the middle of the spring is on the central synchromesh cog, but it's getting really hard to slide him along. I'm not sure if it's because it's misaligned on the other side or just as everything's tightening up. Keeping on trying. I've only gone and bloody done it. I just slid the synchro ring forward and it's popped into place. You can see the end of the spring just hooked over here. Let me try and get this slid the other way. And there is the spring. So there's 1, 2, 3. That bitch is done. Next I've got to do it on the car in place. I am so happy. So there you have it, guys. The legend is true. With a combination of 45°, 30° and straight long reach pliers, you can get one of these 41p springs into one of these without taking it out of your Land Rover. I'll put the instructions in the description. Please link and share this to other Land Rover boards and feel free to copy it. I don't want this knowledge lost. It is possible. Have a great day.